Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and a couple bins that I plan on checking in on today are right behind me on the shelf. They're the ones that are right above each other here. And if you look closely, you're going to see that the markings on the container suggest that the type of worm living in there are European nightcrawlers. ENC is my abbreviation for European nightcrawler. And these systems have been buddied up for a while. They're not the same age. You can see there's different start dates on each. But they've been managed together as a team, sort of, as buddy bins for some time now. 10 days have passed since we last checked in on these bins. So we're going to pop in on these, give them a quick little feeding, and we'll also get a chance to look in on the younger bin that's got that little tail hanging out over there next to the feeding zone indicator. That's part of a compostable bag, so a little test going on in the younger of the two bins. All right, let's get them up on the bench and see how things are progressing. Like I do sometimes, I've got some information to share with you about these two systems. They're buddy bins, some stuff I consider as sisters or twins even if they're on the started on the same day, and other details. But these only got buddied up later. They've got a few weeks in between the two, between their ages, but they're both getting up there. See how many times they've both been fed. The older bin, they started out in breeder buckets where I was feeding every fourth day or something like that, and that's the reason their number of feedings is just so much higher, despite the fact that there's only about a few weeks of age difference between the two bins. The older bin, as you can see, 3 weeks away from hitting 300 days of age. Certainly getting up there, so I just wanted to also show you what they're getting. Big head of romaine lettuce. I guess only one group is gonna, one bin is gonna get the stem end of it. I guess we've got a little bit of coffee that can be distributed in such a way that might make up for any difference, since we're gonna have a hard time trying to divvy up that lettuce equally. These feeding zone indicators are just resting out in the middle, showing us where we last fed. I thought about maybe even coming back in here with some sort of coverings. Most of my systems usually have some form of covering, but I guess depending on the time of year, I might run without. See, one of these pieces of newspaper flyer that has this little flap that hangs out just seems to give it that little extra bit of length. Well, the length is there already, I believe, but just that little bit of extra width, I don't even know if it's even needed. Without it, it would even work well. I've been wanting to possibly go with covering these systems. I might not even need such a large piece. I might have a couple smaller pieces we could use for this. Because at this point, I was trying to get the sense that things might be just right in terms of moisture levels in here. In fact, you know, when it gets to that point, you don't even want to let it get much drier, because exceeding amounts of dryness in the worm bin are sometimes not such a good thing. Every time I see blue shreds anymore, I always associate the blue shreds to some little plastic bits of some sort of blue material that got into my systems once, and I always felt like I had to pick those little shreds out because I would just see them persist, and now I've just gotten in the habit of removing them. I think the real telltale is if I'm able to tear it, break it, then it's actually a piece that's just, you know, looks similar but isn't going to be such a problem in terms of sticking around so long. What's out on the surface is pretty dry, but as you saw, the only thing covering anything here was the feeding zone indicator. So all the stuff on the surface has had a good chance to dry, even though it's been pretty humid recently. Past couple days, finally the humidity is lifted and the nice dry air and slightly cooler temperatures are making it into a beautiful part of the summer now. Sometimes when it's very humid and overly hot, kind of, I don't know, takes the fun out of summer in a way. Some people love the, you know, excessive heat. I like things a little bit cooler, usually. I'll usually try to, you know, free the bag if I can from, you know, the material that's surrounding it without trying my best to not damage the bag itself. I've been trying to drive worm activity onto this bag by placing the food right on it and around it and above it and below it. So this plastic bag did have some, I think, breadcrumbs and maybe worm chow sprinkled beneath it, and then maybe even some coffee, and then on top of it came some tomatoes and some bedding, and a bunch of stuff was placed here to, you know, try to pique the interest of the worms. drive them towards that compostable bag. Yeah, I found this piece of advertising, little booklet, last 2 sheets of it, including the front cover. And I thought that these could probably come in as somewhat better top coverings instead of something so thorough. I mean, you know, we'll be adding a slight bit of moisture to the system with the foods that we're adding, these frozen lettuce heads. I've got some coffee for them too, but that stuff doesn't really have a great deal of moisture in it. The worms do seem to enjoy hanging out on the bag, whether it's, you know, them causing the deterioration of the bag or if the bag is just sort of melting from the surrounding moisture or whatever. I really couldn't tell you for sure, but you know, there's significant signs of wear, and I oftentimes want to kind of have a little footnote when I discuss the wear that, you know, a lot of it could just be caused by me periodically checking it and kind of spreading it out to see how it's deteriorating and yanking on it to get it unearthed from the surrounding material. So how much of that breakdown is really thanks to the bin or thanks to me is anyone's guess. The feeding they got last time was a whole bunch of cherry tomatoes, and I thought that we'd probably see some, at least tomato skins. It's usually the thing that you see after you excavate a feeding zone where tomatoes were fed. I tried to make sure that every tomato had its skin cut so that the worms can gain access to the insides of it and start nibbling it out. And here too you can see the worms making themselves at home within that tomato there. And I guess we'll bump into various tomatoes in various states of decomposition. I would guess that a large number of them have already been eaten because I only see that skin there. Maybe this one here might be a slightly more yellow colored one. No, they've got to be in here. Here's another one. So the skins are definitely still showing up as leftovers. They're just sort of blending in with the surrounding materials. And since they were cherry tomatoes, they're pretty puny. So not much to be seen. Alright, before we come in here with today's feeding, let's make sure we've opened up a spot in the older system. And there's always little babies stuck to my glove. It's always, to me at least, it seems like a good sign to see all these little babies sticking to my glove. Because just the presence of babies in general is kind of cool. And somehow they just always end up on my glove. Alright, same thing would be expected here since these two systems have been getting managed very similarly to each other. In the hopes that we can kind of have an opportunity to compare and contrast how the systems are working, since they should theoretically be working pretty equivalent to one another. Here's a stem of a pumpkin making some pretty good progress. A couple little tomato skins here and there. There's probably a whole bunch more of them just floating around over here, and maybe we'll see a few more, but we don't need to pick them all out. I think we're in good shape here to drop in today's feeding. I've got my prepared bedding here, and you can see the edge where it's been sitting around for some time versus all the newly added stuff. So we'll make sure we're not implanting my supply of bedding with baby worms by trying to get them off my glove before scooping material out of here. But whatever. Sometimes the action of bringing the material over can also serve as a method for getting the wormies off my hands. These weren't very big handfuls. I'm kind of just pinching a little bit right out of the most aged, primed stuff versus reaching into the newly created stuff that's only been in here for a couple days. To me, it seems like the stuff that's been in here for some time is the more desirable, more kind of primed. Good for worm occupation. Now, I guess as we already predicted, one of the systems... Oh, what is this? rubber band. Sometimes your produce comes with a little rubber band. I like to take anything that I know is not going to break down out of the bin. Some people don't care and they'll just leave stuff like that and pick it out later, labels and whatever. To me it seems like get it out because it's not going to go anywhere. So I figured I would maybe throw a few extra leaves in the direction of the older system over here, because then this the younger bin is the one that's going to receive the stem end. I'm starting to wonder if that's a fair distribution. I mean, that's a nice thick bulky piece, but maybe at least a leaf or two coming over to help balance things out. Now that seems to me like a pretty fair split on today's food supply. Let's not forget I've also got coffee. Stuff is nice and moldy. Look at that. We'll just throw a little bit into each. I don't have a whole lot here. We don't have to use it all up. Probably got enough to feed one more system in case I need it. I'll hang on to that. This will be our feeding. The other thing I sometimes put in as well into the coffee, just to make it a little bit more interesting, is my worm chow. This worm chow was replenished yesterday. I ground up a whole bunch of bird seed for the most part. Perhaps a little bit of like pancake mix added in. A couple other things I think, but mainly bird seed. And let's not forget about these leftover bits of tomato. Get them all back down into service. And then this time we didn't sandwich the compostable bag in between layers of food. Oops, see, now that was me. I tore that for sure. Kind of tore open the bottom end of the bag now. It's wide open. Alright, so just for the record, you know, any major deterioration such as that caused by me doesn't really count. So, whatever. Of course it counts, but still, just interesting to see. I definitely couldn't have been able to, you know, it was pretty flimsy when we began, so it was never tough, super tough material. It always felt like it could just break really easily under the least amount of pressure. But now even more so since it's been breaking down. Alright, I figured I would just get some of that dry stuff we scraped off the top and blend that in. Get it going down into the feeding area. Since it deserves a little action, that being out on the surface, it was sort of sacrificial material that was just sort of sitting there doing virtually nothing for some time. Get that pumpkin stem down in the hole too. And now we can consider these systems as fed. Alright, something I like to do is sort of reach as far out as I can to bring in the material with which we're going to backfill and cover up the last feeding, and at the same time we're giving ourselves a chance to see how this stuff down there is holding up and how it looks, how the worms in it look. Luckily things look very nice over there. Let's just finish off the examination of the younger system here. Get things leveled off. Here too, things feel quite nice, but I do like the idea now of coming back in with, even if it's just a sheet of paper, some sort of covering to prevent further moisture loss. With only a piece of paper there, it will definitely result in a fairly dry top surface, but not as much as we saw today. I believe it'll remain a little bit more damp, hopefully promoting a little bit more worm traffic, and I think that'll be good. Let's give this system here the same sort of quick exam just to see how things look in the outskirts furthest away from the feeding zone area where we've been feeding for pretty much the life of the bin, I believe. Very nice stuff. Just little chunks of this and that. Yeah, stuff in these systems looks really nice. I always get a little bit frustrated when I let things get overly damp and then the material just starts holding together like a big block of mud, and you never really see the nice crumbly nature of the castings when it gets that way. It takes a long time to recover from that. You got to be patient, but luckily it is doable. I don't remember if these systems ever really got to the point of seeming to be too damp, but some of my systems have, and I've been sort of limping them back onto the proper moisture consistency slowly, but it is sort of a slow recovery. when that happens. Oh, look at this. Forgot a few pieces of lettuce in here, and guess what? We'll give it to the older bin. A few little chunks. There's a tomato skin too. Let's cover it up. And before we introduce our fancy new coverings here, let's bring back the feeding zone indicators. They're holding up quite nicely as well. And as long as they stay kind of dry sitting out here on the surface, that should continue to be the same story. We'll put the colorful one on the old one, and how about the black and white one on the new one? And that's it. That's our check-in now with our 279 and 255 day old European Nightcrawler worm bins, both doing quite nicely if I do say so myself. As far as getting stuff around here cleaned up and put away, I'll take care of that. But before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. Take care. Bye now.